Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson, your host and guide for the show. I want to give you my gratitude and appreciation for you joining me and being part of our program today. Today, our program, we are airing episode number 144. Episode number 144. This is so exciting. I want to again let you know that I didn't necessarily anticipate how well received the show would be, and thanks to you, it's grown, and now we're at episode 144, which is amazing. I encourage you to come to CourtneyAnderson.com. We are rapidly upgrading and expanding our resources to support the success of this and this show and other initiatives that we put forward. And so at CourtneyAnderson.com, we have a show page. You can come to episode 144 and see expanded show notes, links, check out our show sponsors, everything that you need to jump in and be part of our community. So, again, thank you. So, here we are, and we have a show today that is part of our financial fierceness. Financial fierceness! I love this series. This is all about us taking control and responsibility for what? Our finances. This may be mostly focused on your personal finances. It may be if you're an entrepreneur, executive, your business finances also. But it's about the basics of finance, and again, basics. Certainly, this is something that we know that we are in control of our financial resources, or they're in control of us. So, in our show series today, what are we specifically talking about? Well, this is an intriguing episode. Our specific episode today is why I love paying taxes. Seriously. Why I love paying taxes. Seriously. That's the name of the episode, and again, intriguing. And one of the things when we look at our finances, and of course all of our programs are focusing on how can we meet and surpass our goals, right? And we're always looking big picture in our lives to take the temperature and the measurement, to continually observe with our own metrics, is this working for us? When I mean by this, I mean all of it. The work we do, the choices that we're making, our day-to-day activities, where we live, our health choices, the things that we have some ability to impact. Is it, how do we feel? And the idea here is and again, it's on all candor. When we talk about loving paying taxes, of course, I work with, of course, many very large businesses, some of the largest businesses in the world, doing corporate education and training programs. I work with many startup businesses, entrepreneurs, either in my capacity as an attorney, in my capacity as a professor in graduate business university programs, myself as an entrepreneur, and very passionate and enthusiastic supporter of what I believe the power of business can do positively in people's lives, right? One of our fundamental principles, and we do dedicate ourselves to this idea of what I've coined the joyful art of business, the idea that what we do is in business can and does have very important positive impacts in our individual lives and collectively in larger societies and groups. So when I talk about taxes, there's sort of a knee-jerk immediate reaction, and this is a global issue. Where people will say, "Oh, no, no, no! Business people don't support, paying taxes. Their whole goal is to, eradicate, do away with taxes." Now, I certainly concur that there's an ongoing societal dialogue currently and historically around the world. How much do we share? Which is the basic question. I mean, taxes are us sharing; they're mandated sharing. But how much do we share? How much do we share with our stuff with the group? Right? And so this is not new. This isn't anything modern and that's happened, in this century or even in this millennia. I mean, back to recorded time, this is an ongoing question. How much do we share, if any? And in some societies and some historical periods, it said we're not sharing anything. You take care of yourself, and if you can, great, and if you can't, tough. Other societies and other time periods have said, well, no. we have the ability to eradicate so much, um, suffering, so many bad outcomes, whether through it, starvation or whatever. So we're gonna share. We're gonna all pitch in a little bit, and then that will raise the ability for us to share. So in just calling taxes, this idea is sharing. Now it's mandatory sharing. So the idea with the taxes is that where I'm referring to generically is the idea where a government, or some similar authority with the ability to quote, make something mandatory, comes in and tells the people, if you're going to, reside in this jurisdiction or have a business in this jurisdiction or whatever, then here are the rules. You're going to have to share a certain amount of what you obtain or what you have. But they have to have the mechanism to do that. Some people philosophically just believe that they're anti-sharing. They just and they have, reasons, and they can explain it to you, and they'll say, look, this is just what I believe. I don't believe in sharing. I believe that, and they'll tell you why they don't believe in sharing. And that certainly is something I said. This isn't new. This isn't specific to any, one nation or one time frame. This is an ongoing human question. Do we share? Some people, again, are anti-sharing. Some people are pro-sharing. And then if we are going to share, is it going to be voluntary? Some people say, I'm totally for sharing, but only if I want to share. I'll voluntarily share all I want to. And then but they say, but I don't want to be mandated to share. I don't want to be told I have to share a certain minimum amount. Some people say, I'm anti volunteer sharing, because I believe that if you make it voluntary, some people won't share at all. So you have to make them share a certain amount. These are all ongoing global discussions. This is not a discussion about any specific tax policy. It's not a discussion about any specific nation. It's not a specific issue about any tax type of tax, whether it's a business tax. In some places they're called margin taxes, or it's an income tax, whether it's an individual income tax or a corporate income. I'm not talking about anything like that specifically. I'm talking about the generic big picture of what I'm just calling sharing, which is, am I going to share my stuff with other people, or are other people going to share their stuff with me? And if so, then is it going to be just up to us individually to decide how much I want to share? That's what charitable activities are, right? I'm going to make a charitable donation. That's a voluntary sharing. I didn't have to do that. Nobody said I had to give anything to that charity, but I went ahead and did it. Maybe, and many people are very active in that. Some people, again, are are pro voluntary sharing, and they're anti mandatory sharing. I talk to a lot of people like that. But again, it's a stereotype that if somebody's an entrepreneur, an executive, or economically independent, that they're just anti-sharing. It's a stereotype. Now there are many people who are anti-sharing, but some people who are anti-sharing themselves don't have any resources. Some people are vehemently anti-sharing, and yet they themselves have absolutely no economic independence or income at all. Many people who are anti-sharing, in fact, are only able to, eat and continue to have a place to live because they receive other people's shared resources. I've met and talked to people like that. It seems like a contradiction, and in fact I'd argue it actually is. But people are free to believe whatever they want, even if their own life is a contradiction to what they espouse as a belief system. It's illogical, but it doesn't mean that that you can't do it. It's not illegal. It might be, again, irrational, but it's all about choice. So my argument today in our Financial Fierceness show is about the idea of sharing. And I specifically have said in this show topic, I love paying taxes. And I said why I love paying taxes is what I'm going to talk about. Okay, so here's the thing. These are very complicated issues to try to address in a super simplified way, but that's why I've gone through all this to explain that we're talking about the generic idea of sharing. In general, this isn't a specific issue about any current or past or proposed future specific issue. I have spoken in many different settings and events where we're talking about specific tax or business issues, about specific issues, but that's not what this is. This is a show. That's a global show, and it's intended for everyone who chooses to be part of it. And my point is simply this: at a very rudimentary level, if you in most parts of most economies, so I'm not going to say all, because there are, okay, let me make the point first. In most economies, you don't pay. Now I'm talking individual income taxes. You're not going to pay individual income taxes when you don't make any money, because you don't have any money. So For example, in many tax systems, you have to fill out documentation and say, how much money you made or what your resources are. And then if they're low enough, right, then the government will basically say, okay, you showed us that, what little that you have and what little you made. And so, thank you. And in some instances, you'll even get a refund. Some systems are set up where if you work wages, then money is withheld from each of your paychecks to pay for your part of the sharing, the mandatory sharing, the taxes. But if your total amount for that whole period, which may be a calendar year, let's say, if it's low enough, this has all been predetermined by how low is low, for your family size and your situation, what they'll do is say, okay, you worked, right? So let's say you worked and you made a certain amount of dollars an hour, but you didn't get all of that money. They withheld money from your paycheck. Who's they? Your employer withheld money from your paycheck to send to the government for your mandatory sharing. That's what happened. The government didn't hold it. The employer held it. And then that way the employer says, hey, I did my part. Here's their mandatory sharing. The government then will decide if you've made enough money on their own calculations that you're going to have to make mandatory sharing. If you don't make enough money, according to each individual entity, government entity's own rules they made up, then in many instances, and I can speak to my personal experience, when I was really young and I was working, minimum wage jobs in retail or the restaurants or jobs like this, I made minimum wage, which is literally the lowest amount of money that a government said you can pay somebody for a job. And that's because that I didn't have experience and I didn't have special skills, and that's what I was qualified for. So that's what I made. And so when I would get my paycheck, of course, money would still be withheld for the taxes, potential taxes. And then when I would go file my income tax, my paperwork at the end of the period, every place is different, but they'll have a measurement of how long they're looking at. Then they would say to me, oh, okay, you don't have to pay taxes, and we're going to refund you the money you already paid us because your dollar amount is so low, right? You're basically, I hate the words, but generically poor, right? You're low income. So great. I fill out my paperwork and I get my little tax refund, and I didn't pay any taxes and federal income taxes because I don't have any money. Now there are other taxes. There are taxes that even though when I worked I worked the lowest wage, I still had to pay other taxes because I was living in different times and parts of the world where they have taxes on your transactions, like governmental tax transactions. So they might tax a purchase you make, a sales tax, or sometimes in some parts of the world a value added tax. So I still was paying other taxes like that, right? Some goods are taxed in some parts of the world. If I went to go buy gasoline or petrol, that would be taxed. So I was already paying other taxes just because if you engage in those transactions or you buy those goods, then you're already going to have to pay that extra tax as part of that process. So I wasn't taxed free where I was some special person and everywhere I went it was like no special rules for you. No, the rule generically for everybody in some taxes and some sharing is mandatory. If you're going to buy this thing, then there's extra taxes on it. So you want to buy this gasoline, you want to buy alcohol, you want to buy these things, and by buying it, you're going to have to pay an extra tax. It's already built into it. And I wasn't exempted from that. And in many systems, those taxes function differently where you're not exempted. You're exempted if you don't have the money to buy that thing, then you didn't have to pay the tax, but you also didn't buy that thing. So what I'm talking about why I love paying taxes is when I didn't make any money, I didn't pay as many taxes as I do when I do earn money. And when I didn't pay as many taxes, I could have made the argument, oh, look at how great this is. I'm not paying, especially these income taxes, right? Now, I was still paying these other taxes if I had the money to buy that good, right? Some taxes are just built in. You're going to buy this thing, or you're going to buy this thing in this location. There's already a tax on it. So if you don't want to pay the tax, don't buy that thing. But I could say, well, it was so great. Look how low tax it was for me. I had such a low income tax rate. Well, yeah, but my argument to you, as my community member, is that I wasn't happy paying that low tax, or because I didn't have any money. The only reason I was paying low taxes is because I didn't have anything to share. So the whole idea of mandatory sharing is I have to have stuff to share. If I don't have any stuff to share, whether if I don't have any currency or any way to get something, if I don't have any way to earn it through wages, or I'm not on a trust fund where I've inherited money or somebody's giving me money. If I don't have any money, I'm not going to buy that thing. So yeah, I could argue it's so great because I don't have to pay any taxes, but I don't have any money. And I wasn't in a situation where I was, living in a mansion and I just had unlimited, all the food I wanted at the grocery store or at the market. It wasn't like that. It was like I was living off that money, me. So by not having it, it limited everything. And it was I've done shows on this, how stressful that period was. So the point of this episode, and when I say how happy I am when I pay taxes, is because I only pay taxes because I'm making money. And I like to make money. I just said it. I like to be able to have choices. I like to be able to know, oh, okay, my refrigerator, my fridge is broken and I need a new refrigerator. I need it repaired, but I can do that because I have some money, so I can have someone come fix it or get a new one. When you don't have any economic opportunity, then you have very few choices. You just can't do anything. I'm not worrying about how much gasoline or diesel or petrol is going to be taxed if I don't have a vehicle to put it in, right? I'm not worried about income tax if I don't have any income. Now some systems actually tax everybody, even if you don't have any income. There's, some systems that everybody has to pay income tax. Some systems say some people don't have enough, whatever they define that is. I'm not arguing that again. What I'm saying is this. I love having the ability to pay a tax because it means I made money. I made enough money to meet whatever the government standards are for that part of the world, for that issue. But it also means, though, that I have enough money to pay tax, and I almost always am going to have enough money left over to do other stuff with it. This only works, of course, in a system where there's an exemption for people who are low enough income. The more taxes I pay, and every once in a while, I rarely do this, but every once in a while I'll look and I'll say, wow, I pay more in taxes now than I used to earn. You know what I mean? Like, my mandatory sharing is higher than I would earn in a whole, it's crazy. Right? That's more than I earned. This just the part that I pay mandatory sharing. That's wow. But the thing is, I love being able to pay taxes because it means I'm making money. If I'm not paying taxes, I'm not making money. And if I'm not making money, then in many parts of the world, definitely if you don't have individual resources from your family or friends or somebody who's just going to give you money, if you don't have any money in many parts of the world, then you're not going to get those things. If you don't have any money, then you're not going to be able to buy those things at the store to eat. If you don't have any money, well, then you're not worried about the tax at the gas station because you're not going there because you don't have a vehicle or any way to get around. So I wasn't sitting around deliriously happy, and I'm not going to make a show saying why I love not paying taxes because I did not pay it's income tax specifically because I didn't have any money and I didn't love it. I hated it because I was broke. So today, do I pay a lot, relatively speaking, to what I paid before? Yeah. Do I love that? Yeah. Because I have more stuff. In many parts of the world, especially income tax, many parts of the world, it's based on your income. It's what it sounds like, right? The more stuff I have, then I'm going to share at some point. And the more money I have, then the more I'm going to share. In some systems, I'm not getting into tax policy. What I'm arguing, though, is if 10% or 20% of 30% of zero is still zero. So if you say to people, even if you said to people, hey, the tax rate is 75%. Okay, well, if I have zero, I don't care what the tax rate is. In my mind, if I am broke and I have zero, you could make the taxes 100%. Now, if you went over 100%, if you said, we're going to tax 110%, then I'll pay attention. Although, honestly, I'm not going to be worried because I still have zero. And 110% of zero is still zero. Now, I would start to worry that maybe if I got $1, dinar, euro, whatever, that I'd be listening to the 110% because now you might be hitting me if I get, because I might get at some point where I'm listening. But if I don't have anything, I'm not worried about taxes because I don't have anything. You're not taxing me anyway. And even if I'm in a part of the world where I am under mandatory taxes, no matter how little I make, how do I pay it? Saying what a tax is one thing. Having an actual system, a governmental system, a private and public sector system where people are actually paid tax, so something totally different. And we all see that when we look globally around the world and we have a global discussion about, some parts of the world, they aren't collecting taxes at all because people just don't pay. And I'm not going to, again, I said at the beginning of the show, mandatory sharing is only mandatory if there's something that's going to force me to do it. If I know that I don't have to pay if I don't want to pay and nothing's going to happen to me, I'm not going to pay. Unless, again, I believe in voluntary sharing, which that's a totally different system. So you have to have governments that function, you have to have institutions that function, you have to have a way to make people or compel people to pay. Otherwise, all the people who just philosophically or ethically don't believe in being forced to share just won't do it. You have to make them do it. That's why it's called mandatory. And there's other institutions that already compete in the voluntary. There's tons of institutions. I get stuff at least daily from some voluntary place asking me to, give a voluntary sharing contribution, charitable contribution. I give a lot, and I've set it up at this point where if when I leave this planet as I know it, then it's all going to go to charities. But um, if it's going to be mandatory, which is the word tax typically is implied, it's mandatory, then you have to have a way to make it be mandatory, to make people pay. And I'm saying that I love it. I really do. Because every year, this is the total truth, every year when I look and I say, wow, I'm often really shocked and surprised. Wow, look at that. Look at all that income. That's awesome. I feel good about myself. Why? Because I'm making enough money to pay taxes. And again, I'm not talking about a system where it's so poorly structured where everything that somebody earns is taken by the government, because that's a different system, right? We're not talking about government takeovers of individuals and entities. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, let's say it's a system, and the system is you're going to pay 20%. 20% of what? 20% of zero is zero. So if I have low, or no income, I don't really care because I don't pay anything. Now, some people, I said earlier, will be in a situation where they themselves actually don't pay taxes, but they are in a situation where they actually may receive the mandatory sharing. What does the tax go to? Well, it goes to the collective. Now, it's a whole nother debate. I'm not touching, where the money goes, right? Some people say, well, we have to spend it on transportation. We have to spend it on making sure we have got clean water, making sure we have, our food isn't poisoned. We have to make sure that some systems say, hey, we have to make sure that our people have the ability to, not die for illness or something like that. So we have to have, some health care. Some systems say we have, whatever. I'm not debating what you spend the tax on. Totally different question. What I am saying is mandatory sharing. Some people are just 100% opposed to it no matter what, even if it in their mind goes to something that would be fine. They just don't believe in it. Some people are totally 100% committed to it and say, I believe in it all the way. Some people believe in sharing voluntary and mandatory. So they give to charity and they're happy to pay whatever taxes because they feel like that's just what it matches their belief system. Other people feel like, if you're going to make me pay it, I'll do it just because I don't want the bad consequence if there's enforcement, but I'm not going to be happy about it and I'm going to complain about it and I'm going to do everything I can to try to keep it as low as possible. Obviously, if it was a situation where I was in a locale where every single penny I made, was taken, then I wouldn't support it because I wouldn't have any options. The reason I said I like paying taxes is because I've been under systems where I'm paying taxes only because I have enough money to pay taxes. I have extra money. And that I pay a percentage of what I have. I'm not going to pay 100% of what I have because then I wouldn't like it at all. Because then I'd be in the same position I was when I didn't have any income at all. I'd be poor because I couldn't have any options. I couldn't fix the refrigerator. I couldn't go to the store and buy something nice to eat because I don't have any money. So I don't mind sharing some, right? That's my ethics. I wouldn't want to share all because then I wouldn't have anything. And if I lived in a society where I didn't have anything, then I'll be dependent on other people to share with me for me to be able to get somewhere to live, to stay in shelter and to have something to eat and to have some clean water. It's a tough position. I'm trying to maximize my choices, my ability to have a place to live that I enjoy, and my ability to have options in terms of what food I can eat, or if I have the ability to have transportation options, depending on what part of the world you're in, a vehicle or some other sort of mode of transport that gives me more autonomy. I'm about opportunity and autonomy. Individually, this is just my own individual perspective. So I love paying taxes if it's a percentage of what I have because it means I have stuff. And then whatever doesn't go to the tax is mine to spend as I want. And it might be that I want something nice to eat. It might be that I would like a nice refrigerator. It might be that I want to hire people to work with me in my businesses. It might be that I want to invest in more real estate. Who knows? It might be that I want to spend it all on buying a lot of candy, and I want to have candy and roll around in candy all day in a big room of candy. People do silly things with their resources, and people do admirable things with their resources. But again, people decide at some level. I believe in the decision. I believe that people should have the freedom, it's their resources, to do as they choose. I believe that I want to share because I have seen and experienced in different ways what happens in societies when there's no sharing. It becomes really difficult for you to have um, many of the factors that make it attractive for businesses to invest. It's hard to get things done when I don't have a way to enforce when a contract isn't followed through. When the rule of law is weak, when there's not a lot of good access to infrastructure and redress in the system, it makes it difficult to get stuff done because it's often difficult to do anything other than make deals based on nepotism and sometimes, corruption and bribery. Those are hard systems to work in, especially for outsiders. It's hard to come in and invest in those systems because you don't have any of those personal connections, right? You weren't born into the right family or things of that nature. It becomes really difficult to expand and invest in those systems because as an investor, entrepreneur, you're thinking, I'm never going to be able to get my money out of here. And if I do, if I have to deal with some sort of corruption or bribery or potential safety issue, it's often too high risk. It's not worth it, right? What a headache. You want to be able to believe in a contract. You want to believe you can enforce your rights. And it's difficult to do that when you don't have the ability to do it in real life. So one of the things we talk about in our Law Lovers Lounge series, which I strongly encourage you if you haven't taken part in to access that whole series of shows, we talk about in that show and the whole idea of the Law Lovers Lounge series, why I love law. And I mean it because I love the ability to know I can trust the contract and then I can enforce it impartially, that I don't have to go and be born in the right family to the right people in the right town and all this to be able to get something done. Like I want to be able to say, hey, I had a deal. This is the contract we had. It was either, breached or here was the problem. And I can go to an impartial, somewhat, nothing's perfect, but somewhat impartial place. And it's easily accessible and it does move at some speed. That makes me more comfortable investing. And I love it. So rule of law and having stability of systems and the ability to enforce contracts is a big, big, big deal for people who have businesses and investments. And I think that the mandatory sharing, right, is another part of that. Is that you share because that way it gives people an opportunity. If people starve to death and die out in the society because there's no sharing that's mandatory and everything isn't. There's no system in way to distribute sharing. So maybe in systems that are voluntary with weak infrastructure, the same way that maybe you can't enforce a contract, it's difficult to get resources delivered to people because the infrastructure is really weak, right? If you have infrastructure that's stronger, then even whether it's voluntary sharing or mandatory sharing, it's easier to distribute it. It's not like, oh, there's so many examples of this around the world and historically where people did voluntarily give. Oh, look at all those resources we gave, but they were never distributed to the people in need. So the people still starve to death because there's no infrastructure apparatus set up without corruption that works in a timely manner to get the things distributed. And it's just heartbreaking. So I do believe that there needs to be some level of reliable infrastructure and process. And so my personal belief is I believe in mandatory and voluntary sharing. I do. And I am certain there are people who would look in my personal finances and chastise me and say, well, look at money you waste on whatever, maybe on my pets or some other thing that I care about that might not be to other people that important. But my argument is that you have a certain amount of resources that because of where you are in the world, you're able to be part of that system, whether it's education or healthcare, things of that nature. And so it benefits you. If you live in a part of the world where there are rules of law and infrastructure that make it more stable and then open it up to more growth and investment, then you benefit from that. So I'm more than happy to do my mandatory sharing. Of course, there are limits, right? Again, I wouldn't agree to 100% mandatory sharing because that then would leave people with nothing. So there's got to be some level below that, obviously, where people can then have the resources left over for these, somewhat silly things. People have hobbies and interests and it could be anything. But if it makes them happy and somebody wants to spend their extra resources on, you know, making quilts, or knitting or spending time with turtles or, rebuilding old motorcycles or whatever it is. And that makes, or playing video games or honestly, if it's legal, I support it. Because who are we to judge what makes someone else interested in a hobby or an interest? And I do love paying taxes because when I didn't pay taxes, I could have had a whole, party, I guess. Look at me, I didn't pay taxes, but it wouldn't have been much of a party because I didn't have any money, which made it hard then to do a lot of things, most things. So I love to be able to pay taxes because the more tax I pay, the more that means I made more money. That makes me happy. It makes me happy because not that there's some specific number or anything that silliness, but what it means is I have options. I have the option to launch this program, this radio podcast. It allows me the option to take a class if I'm interested in something and I want to learn about it. It allows me the option to have, you know, healthy food if I can go and afford it. Options. So yes, I do love paying taxes because when I didn't pay taxes, I didn't have any money, and I didn't love that at all. I want to have options, and I prefer personally to live in parts of the world, and it's many, 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 many parts of the world, where we share, because some people are unable to support themselves. They may have physical, medical, sometimes mental or psychological, developmental issues, so they're unable, and that may be me. At any time in my life. And I sure would hope that I would be in a part of the world where there's sharing. Just because I'm unable to contribute by, working or owning assets that are income producing, it doesn't mean that I don't have value as a human. It's my personal opinion. Now, of course, I do, again, believe there needs to be an ongoing dialogue, as there is, and I've been every part of the world I've been to, about how you calibrate that. And I also think there needs to be a lot of pressure to make sure that if we're sharing, whether it's voluntary or mandatory, that whatever we're sharing is getting to the people who need it, right? Again, we don't want that heartbreaking situation where people gave to charity and then the food or the resources that were there to help people never even got to the people and the people still starved. Well, how does that happen? Well, lack of infrastructure, lack of transparency, right? Corruption, all these types of things. So I really honestly hope that you revisit your perspective on sharing. I do encourage, and I've said in other programs, that if you have the ability to share your time, your talent, your resources, that you do so. I don't have any hard and fast rules or what. It's up to you, but I think you should be of service as much as you're able. And the benefits that come to you from being of service are wonderful. I think if you live in a part of the world where there's mandatory sharing, if it's mandatory sharing, and your argument is I'm not against mandatory sharing, but I'm against fill in the blank, city, county, state, a nation because they wasted on quote fill in the blank frivolous thing. Okay, well, that will go on forever because one person's thing that's frivolous is to somebody else incredibly important thing. And just like some individual would say, hey, I'm going to spend my personal leftover income on my pet snake. My pet snake makes me happy. It's the most important thing in my life. I love my pet snake. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure my pet snake has the best, food and resources. And other people would say, who cares about your stupid pet snake? That's stupid. Well, but that's their choice. And it's the same thing as a society. Some people really believe that we should put all the resources into preserving the environment. Other people would say, I could care less about the environment. Neither of them are, quote, wrong. They just have different perspectives. I would think maybe in the middle, we need to look and see with data and research. Okay, and then you can't give everything all the money you want because there's a finite amount of resources, but you certainly can allocate things differently. And that's what discussions in healthy societies are about. No one should be walking around in a healthy society 100% gleeful that everything they personally would have imagined would happen, because then it's not probably going to be an open society. Maybe that's historically a society where there's one person who runs everything. Well, then, yeah, they'd be happy because the society is them. It's just all their wishes. That's not the same system that you have in most parts of the world. Um, so there was a lot that was touched on in this episode, and a lot that I sit there and I mention these things, and I think that's another program. I would love to talk about that. But there's finite amounts of time in my life and your life. But I do want you to use this show to open up your mind and to think, yes, you're going to have your own ethical and personal beliefs about sharing. Totally awesome. You do have the choice if you're in a part of the world where you feel that what they're doing with the sharing is horrible and the worst you've ever seen. Just pick up your stuff and move somewhere else. That's the honest truth. And whatever mechanisms exist in your society, if there are any, to create change in the dialogue about how you allocate the sharing, then take part, vote or be active. If there's no mechanism, then you want to reevaluate again. It's a big planet. If you have the ability, get on a plane, get on a train, get on a boat, go somewhere else. Um, we are all a work in progress as humans. No one place ever has had the answer. But there's certainly things that places do better than other places that we can learn better by. What do I mean by that in terms of outcomes, right? Health, longevity, um, lack of social ills, things of that nature. So yeah, there's data, that we can definitely access. You want to look at the sharing. This was all about mandatory sharing. I said I love it because I only share and pay mandatory taxes when I have any money, and I like having money and options to be able to live a different type of life. So I do love it. It makes me happy. It makes me feel good. In fact, I'm happy to pay more taxes. I've had some very spirited discussions with tax professionals over the years who disagree with me on my personal perspective and say to me, "Well, you could take more aggressive options here to pay less." And I'm aware of it. I'm fortunate that the um, licensing for attorneys in the Texas where I was um, originally a lawyer, part of the process was all about, it was tested, federal income tax, FIT, it was part of that. So I've taken those and tested, and I feel pretty confident in my decisions. But I know what I'm doing. And also, as a small business owner, which is a different topic, especially after the economy contracted globally, it's very difficult to get investment from banks and other financial partners if your taxes show that you don't make any money. It used to be that you could go out and buy a home and all kind of things, and just say, well, look how great my credit is, and I'm self-employed, and I'll tell you what my income is, and you can just trust me because I always pay my bills, because look at my credit report. You used to be able to do that. You're not able to do that currently, and I doubt you're going to be able to do it in the future with just no verification, right? No income, no assets, no verification. People are going to want to verify. So I have stuck to my plan of being reasonable. I mean, I take the many of the benefits are available to me, and I'm reasonable, but I would also like to maximize. My goal when I fill out and this is U.S. based income taxes, is to get my adjusted gross income as high as I can within reason. What that means is, if I go and I took every single very aggressive deduction or option available to me, and I had a very low AGI, adjusted gross income, then what'll happen when I go to want to buy, let's say I want to go buy some new real estate. Well, a lender, if I'm not paying cash and I want to borrow the money, a lender is going to look and say, hey, your paperwork shows you make a very low amount of money. You don't make enough money to pay for this and pay for all your other investments in real estate and other obligations. So it used to be, again, prior to certainly this most recent economic contraction and crisis, that lenders would used to, because I know I bought houses in real estate before, where you could go to a lender and say, look at my credit, I pay all my bills, look how awesome I am. You can trust based on my great credit, certainly that, and I'm self-employed, so even though my numbers look really low on my taxes, you can trust that I can pay this, because I work for myself, and I'll find a way. Maybe be more aggressive in my business, maybe cut business expenses, whatever. And there used to be a lot more flexibility for the self-employed, but now post 2008, that doesn't exist. And I've purchased property, and my system of working to be prudent, right, to make good choices, but also to understand I need a high um, adjusted gross income. I need it as high as I can get it within reason, so that when I go to a bank or a lender, if I need to, then I can show, see, right here, making money, and I can afford to purchase whatever this is. And so I did that. And again, I've had some really interesting discussions with tax professionals who vehemently disagree with my system. But my argument would be, if I was so aggressive and I showed some really really low income, yeah, it would save me on taxes. But the problem is when I need to go to an outside partner, um, then I'm not going to be able to document and show that I have enough income. It's not necessarily going to help me all in every aspect. And I'm not so focused on every mandatory sharing dollar. So I contribute a little bit more to mandatory sharing, and I still have, in my mind, plenty to invest. And then when I need to go, especially as a small business independent employee, which I've been up until recently, my whole life I never had an employment contract ever. Um, Now I've been teaching, fortunately, for a wonderful university, so I've had that very very recently. Um, but I needed to be able to show, here's my income. So I didn't, and so my system, when I say I love paying taxes, I practice what I preach, along with everything else we talk about, unfortunately, right? I'm trying to explain a little bit of why I do it, and I'm trying to also give you some examples of why my system has advantages. Now, if you're somebody who wasn't self-employed, if you're somebody who has a very high employee wage, then my system wouldn't necessarily resonate with you, because you're going to have a different situation. You're going to have tax. You're going to have what they call pay stubs, which is basically a copy of how much your external employer pays you in your wages and salary. That would be another way for you to verify income that's not available to someone who is self-employed. So I'm telling you why I do it. I'm telling you some of the positive consequences of it. There's negative consequences too. Some people say you're a horrible person because you paid extra mandatory sharing, but it was a nominal amount in my mind, which is all subjective and relative, and also it opened up the ability for me then to maximize my official federal government income, which also then opens more doors for me in case I ever need to expand or have outside funding. So there's a very strong argument on the other side not to do what I do, but I'm listening and I'm always learning. One of the things that we're doing, of course, now that we've expanded our show, of course, this is episode 144. Come to CourtneyAnderson.com. We have a show page specifically dedicated just to the show. We have sponsors now that our show is growing and more viable than I had originally even imagined, which is really awesome and exciting. One of the show sponsors, and our specifically highlighted show sponsor for this show, is HP. And HP is Hewlett Packard. They are a well-known global brand. And interestingly, when I was looking this up, so come to the show page where we talk about this show, right? Why I Love Paying Taxes, episode number 144. You'll find it on CourtneyAnderson.com. And you'll go to we've got a link. So we've got an advertisement sponsor section, and we've got a link to HP. That's our show sponsor, primary show sponsor for this episode. And when you go and you look at HP, of course, many times you think, oh, okay, computers, a lot of electronics. But it's interesting because I knew a lot about the business HP, right? It was two people, Hewlett and Packard, who started this while they were in school. They did a startup in a rented garage, but it's a 75-year-old company, and that's really interesting. And that detail when I was looking to verify the right show sponsor, I thought, wow, that certainly is impressive. So come to our show page, and access HP from there. There's a link there that way we'll get the recognition from our corporate sponsor that you came from our show. And they have a lot of different, obviously a wide variety of options for you to look and see what they provide a consumer. But I also think it's a way for you to look in some of the advertising, of course, is showing some of their really attractive pricing. And again, it's all about thinking things through, making choices that are going to work for you in your life, and investing in products and services where you feel like it's part of your overall plan and where you're going with what you're doing. So just because you want to, maybe you'll listen and you'll say, well, hey, I already loved paying taxes. That's why I wanted to listen to this show. I totally agree with you. I pay all the taxes, and then I also do voluntary sharing, and I'd love to share. Great. But you also want to get to a point, which is another show. Some people give so much away, then they themselves deny themselves, right? I'm talking about the stereotype of somebody who hasn't had, a new pair of socks, in 15 years, and what they have is got holes and it's threadbare, and because they're denying themselves anything. That's another extreme where we again become unhealthy. We've got to have moderation and balance. So whether or not it's through this specific show sponsor that you invest in something that was a great, and it was a great deal I got, well, good, but you want to make sure it's about balance, right? Again, some people come from cultural and some spiritual and religious backgrounds where they believe in part of that they give everything away, and they're able to subsist on their organization or their groups, other people sharing, which is fine if that works and that gives them joy. It's all about what works for you, and I appreciate you listening to a little bit of what might be a bit unconventional, although I actually don't think it is. I really don't think it's that unconventional. I think people have discussions and a lot of interest in how organizations share, whether it's a charity or a government. We want to make sure that what we're sharing gets to the people in need. I don't think that's at all unusual. And some people, again, are 150%, it's not even accurate, but 100% against sharing at all. And some people are 100% in favor of sharing. And again, we talk about those extremes can sometimes, often, unfortunately, lead to some stressful and hurtful outcomes. But maybe some calibration along the the range of options between 100% in either direction is a healthy way for you to continue to reassess what you're doing. But I'm happy to earn enough money to be able to pay taxes, and I'm delighted to be able to have more options in my life due to the different economic opportunities that have opened up. So that's what I had to base my discussion on, and I hope that you come to CourtneyAnderson.com and share with us what you think. What's your perspective on this issue? I'd love to hear from you. So again, I appreciate you taking time out of your life to be part of our show today. Thank you.